In tonight's news edition, King Abdullah will lead Jordan's delegation at the 68th session of the UN General Assembly tomorrow, where leaders and officials will present their views about pressing world issues. For the first time in 6 years, Israel allows construction material for private projects into the Gaza Strip in response to a request by the Palestinian president. And German Chancellor Angela Merkel wins a landslide victory in elections that put her within reach of the first absolute majority in parliament in half a century. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King begins his working visit to the U.S. in New York tomorrow, where he will lead Jordan's delegation at the 68th session of the UN General Assembly. The Assembly's annual general debate opens on Tuesday and runs through the 24th of this month. During the week, heads of state as well as government and other high national officials will present their views about pressing world issues. Leaders' Week is the single largest gathering of world leaders and ministers.
His Majesty the King will deliver an address at the 68th session of the UN General Assembly and meet UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, a number of heads of states and senior figures as part of continuing consultations and coordination efforts in connection with latest developments in the Middle East. In his speech, the King will address Jordan's stance towards regional developments, especially in relation to the Syria crisis and efforts to bring about a peace deal between the Palestinians and Israelis. This year, the General Assembly meeting will discuss a host of issues, including achieving economic growth and sustainable development, preserving international peace and security, and enhancing human rights. Other topics for discussion will include coordinating efforts on humanitarian aid and enforcing justice and international law, disarmament, crime prevention, and combating international terrorism in all its forms and manifestations.
The Council of Ministers commended measures taken by the Ministry of Water and Irrigation to close down some 770 unlicensed wells in various regions across the kingdom. During a session chaired by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour, the Cabinet said the process of closing unlicensed wells, as well as ending violations against water resources and networks, will continue. The Cabinet also approved a decision by the Jordan Valley Authority Board to allocate 635 housing units to underprivileged citizens in the Valley area. And for the first time in 6 years, Israel began allowing construction material for private projects into the Gaza Strip via its border crossing. An Israeli official said the move comes in response to a request from Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. About 350 truckloads a week of gravel, cement, and steel would be delivered to Gaza for use by private builders. At the Karam Abu Salim crossing, 90 trucks carrying building materials were seen entering the facility, where the cargo would be offloaded and transferred to Palestinian vehicles. But Palestinian officials say the 70 truckloads Israel was expected to transfer each day would fall short of the number needed to meet reconstruction requirements. European diplomats are holding Israel accountable over an incident in which occupation forces attacked an EU humanitarian convoy in the occupied West Bank and seized aid meant for Palestinians. Israel rejected the EU statement as one-sided and said European diplomats delivering the items have breached the law. On Friday, occupation forces manhandled the diplomats and seized tents and emergency aid they were trying to deliver to Palestinians in Khirbat el-Makhul, where ramshackle homes were demolished by Israel this week. EU officials described the Israeli actions as shocking and outrageous and asked Israel to explain the aid confiscation. Witnesses at the scene saw Israeli soldiers throwing sound grenades at the group of diplomats and workers and local residents and yanked a fresh diplomat out of the truck before driving it away. But Israel's foreign ministry issued a statement saying it rejects the EU's one-sided announcement.
Are posted abroad in order to build bridges, not to act as provocateurs. Israel rejects both the statements coming out of the European Union and perhaps even more so the behavior of a number of European diplomats at the incident in the northern Jordan Valley on Friday.
In Damascus today, a mortar shell landed in the compound of the Russian embassy, but there were no reports of casualties. Syrian rebels have launched several mortar and rocket attacks in recent months into the center of the capital, where many embassies and senior Syrian officials are based. In February, the Russian mission was damaged when a car bomb exploded nearby on a busy Damascus highway, killing 50 people. On the ground, there were reports of fighting between rebels and government forces at the Damascus neighborhood of Barzeh. Here's more in this report.
As diplomatic talks over the war in Syria continue, so does the fighting. Amateur video posted online claims to show opposition fighters battling pro-government forces in a rebel-held Damascus suburb. This is Barzeh, just north of central Damascus, the neighborhood's seen heavy fighting in recent weeks. The video purports to show that government forces tried to mount an attack here, but Reuters can't verify the veracity of the video. In it, a voice is heard saying that government tanks are withdrawing from the site. God is great, the speaker says. Separate video purports to show another Damascus suburb, Jobar, as rebels stage an assault there on a building believed to be a stronghold for government forces. On Sunday, Reuters learned that the opposition Syrian National Council has told the United Nations Security Council it's committed for the first time to attend a proposed Geneva peace conference. Their attendance comes with conditions which Syrian President Bashar al-Assad may not accept, and so the fighting rages in a 2.5-year-long conflict that's already claimed over 100,000 lives.
Over to Iraq, a suicide bomber blew himself up inside a tent filled with mourners, killing at least 16 people. The attack in the district of Dura also left some 35 people wounded and comes a day after a triple bombing at a funeral in Baghdad's Sadr city that killed 85 people. In a statement, the acting UN envoy to Iraq condemned violence in all its forms, but said he was particularly appalled by the increasing number of vicious attacks against those already bereaved. He added that retaliation can only bring more violence, and it is the responsibility of all leaders to take strong action, not to let violence escalate further. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said Tehran is ready for negotiations with Western powers, providing there are no preconditions, and affirmed once again that the world needs to accept Iran's right to enrich uranium. Rouhani spoke in an address to a military parade to commemorate the annual Sacred Defense Week, just hours before leaving to New York for the UN General Assembly meeting. He said any such talks should accept Iran's nuclear rights within the framework of international law. The White House has left open the possibility that U.S. President Barack Obama and Rouhani could meet on the sidelines of the UN meeting. A meeting between the two leaders would be the highest-level U.S.-Iranian contact since the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
The Iranian nation is ready for negotiations with Western powers, provided they set no preconditions. They concentrate on the issue, are respectful of their counterparts, are not thinking only of their own personal interest, and take under consideration the interests of the opposition. And all the rights of Iran, including nuclear and enrichment rights on our own territory, should be accepted within the framework of international law.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel hailed her conservative bloc's victory in Germany's national election as an excellent result, but said it was too early to discuss plans for the next government. This is a super result, Merkel told cheering supporters after television exit polls showed her Christian Democrats and their Bavarian sister party, the Christian Social Union, winning 42% of the vote. Merkel also thanked her husband, who stood at the side of the stage as she spoke.
We will do all we can in the next 4 years together to make them successful years for Germany. It is too early to say how we will proceed, but today we should celebrate.
das Vertrauen gegeben haben.
Merkel's center-left rival Pierre Steinbrück said whose Social Democrats came in second place on round 26%, said it was for Merkel to decide now what a future government will look like. The last time a German party won an absolute majority was in 1957 with conservative leader Konrad Adenauer. And over to Kenya, and the death toll from a terrorist attack on a shopping mall in Nairobi has risen to 68. After 9 more bodies were brought out from the mall, scores of hostages continued to be holed up with gunmen from Al-Shabaab group who stormed the upscale mall yesterday. Al-Shabaab group said they carried out the attack because of Kenya's intervention in Somalia, where it is working alongside other African peacekeeping troops. Here's more.
Day to day, Kenyan military forces have engaged in sporadic gun battles with the Islamic extremist Al-Shabaab, who claimed responsibility for the attack on the Westgate Mall yesterday, killing 59 people and leaving over 170 wounded. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta, in an address to the nation, said one of his close family members were among the dead and vowed to stand firm against Somali militants. Kenyatta was cautious about the outcome of the hostage crisis, saying chances of the siege ending well were as good can be hoped for.
We shall not relent on the war on terror. We will continue that fight, and we urge all people of goodwill throughout the world to join us and to ensure that we uproot this evil. So if their thought is that this was to intimidate us, it has only increased our commitment to fight and win this war.
While some were able to escape until this hour, about 10 to 15 gunmen are holed up in the mall with unknown number of hostages, with some reports estimating there are up to 200 hostages, including those hiding in various places of the mall. Foreigners, including 3 Britons and 2 diplomats, one from Canada and another from Ghana, were killed in the attack at the upmarket mall. France said 2 of its citizens were killed, and the United States said several U.S. citizens were hurt. Many victims were at cooking competition when assailants opened fire on them. World reactions poured in condemning the attack. United Nations Security General Ban Ki-moon called the act totally reprehensible and expressed his solidarity with the people and government of Kenya.
I condemn in the strongest terms yesterday's terrorist attacks at Nairobi's Westgate Mall. This premeditated act targeting defenseless civilians is totally reprehensible. The perpetrators must be brought to justice as soon as possible.
British Foreign Secretary William Hague called the attack callous and cowardly and said Britain will continue to support counter-terrorism efforts in the region.
All our thoughts are with the people of Kenya and with innocent people who may be caught up in this. This is clearly a complex attack, clearly a terrorist attack, and a particularly callous, cowardly and brutal attack, targeting innocent people of all ages and so many different backgrounds.
And as the deadly mall siege in Nairobi continues, the Kenyans are doing one of the only things they can do while they wait: donating blood to help this cause of injured victims. Luay Balqar for the news at 10.
Pope Francis condemned the blast at a church in Pakistan that killed 78 people as an act of hatred and war. In an unprepared remarks at the end of a one-day trip to the city of Cagliari on the Italian island of Sardinia, he said only the path of peace can build a better world. The attack on a church in the city of Peshawar occurred just after Sunday Mass, when a pair of suicide bombers blew themselves up outside the church located in a densely populated area near a market. More than 600 parishioners were inside the church for the service. More than 100 people were also wounded in the blast, the deadliest sectarian attack since Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was sworn in June. Violence has been on the rise in Pakistan in past months undermining Sharif's efforts to tame the insurgency after coming to power.
Which religion and which law gives permission to do such an act? Then they call it right? 7 children died, 37 are wounded, out of which 11 are in critical condition.
Earlier, Pope Francis made one of his strongest attacks on the global economic system at a meeting with unemployed workers at the start of his visit to Sardinia's capital. He said the current economic system could no longer be based on a god called money and urged the unemployed to fight for work. Francis spoke off the cuff to thousands of people at the start of his day-long trip to Sardinia, where he met with unemployed workers and told them he knew well what it was like to suffer from financial crisis. The crowd of 20,000 chanted what Francis called a prayer for work. The Pope later celebrated Mass for some 300,000 people and said, "We do not want this globalized economic system which does us only harm."
È la conseguenza di una scelta mondiale.
God wanted that at the center of the world. There wouldn't be an idol but man and woman, who go forward with work and thus keep the world moving forward. But now, in this system, without ethics, at the core there is an idol and the world has become idolatry of this god called money.
A powerful typhoon is heading towards the southern Chinese city of Hong Kong amid warnings of severe flooding as well as strong winds in the event of a direct hit. Typhoon Suyagi, the strongest storm to hit the western Pacific this year, has forced the cancellation of more than 300 flights. Warning signals were hoisted as winds intensified and the harbor churned with waves. The storm, which killed 2 people in the Philippines, was expected to buffet the city through tomorrow, possibly closing financial markets and the stock exchange. And to the world of fashion, and the Milan Fashion Week is still in full swing. Dolce & Gabbana showcased their new collection inspired by the ideas of myth and reality. Dresses were decorated in an ornate style with almond tree flowers placed on the fabric to create a 3D effect. The glamorous outfits were made from an array of fabrics, including organza lace, brocade, and gold-painted leather. Adding to the theme of the ancient world, coins and stones were used to decorate wedges with large bold coins on belts and jewelry. Luxury fashion house Versace started off its collection with studded biker blazers paired with leather skirts and dresses for the rock chick in all of us. Models sashayed down the runway wearing chainmail and bandage-style dresses, which also created a unique biker look for next year's spring and summer. Darker shades were brightened up with chunky metal chains, and white and lighter colored outfits were worn with towering platform heels. Feyenoord beat Utrecht 1-0 in the Dutch Eredivisie thanks to Tony Villanella's goal in the 35th minute. Utrecht's best chance at a tie came 50 minutes into the game when Yassine Ayoub met a corner with his head, but the midfielder's effort just went over the crossbar. Feyenoord could have doubled their lead in the 58th minute when midfielder Jordi Claycy had a shot from the edge of the penalty area, which Utrecht goalkeeper did well to save. Feyenoord has now gone 3 games unbeaten in the league and are 8th in the table on 10 points, which puts Utrecht at 14 on 8 points. From soccer, we move to mountain biking 4-cross world championship in Austria. The conditions were ideal for the 5,000 spectators watching Gust Wichmann of the Netherlands as he won the men's race, overtaking France's Quentin Derber in the closing stage to seal victory in his last world champion race. Michael Muchera of the Czech Republic finished third, while his compatriot Thomas Slavik came in fourth. In the women's race, Australian Caroline Buchanan took an early lead and finished comfortably ahead of Britain's Katie Kurd. Céline Gross of France finished in third, while Anneke Bertien of the Netherlands crashed heavily and carried her demolished bike over the line. And finally, chilly and partly cloudy conditions continue tonight with southwesterly light to moderate winds. Tomorrow it continues to be partly cloudy with a chance for light rain in the northern regions, while winds will be northwesterly moderate to brisk, blowing dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively hot weather tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. King Abdullah will lead Jordan's delegation at the 68th session of the UN General Assembly tomorrow, where leaders and officials will present their views about pressing world issues. For the first time in 6 years, as Israel allows construction material for private projects into the Gaza Strip in response to a request by the Palestinian president. And German Chancellor Angela Merkel wins a landslide victory in elections that puts her within reach of the first absolute majority in parliament in half a century. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.